All right. Welcome to everybody. My name is Tim Stewart. I've been working with customers to collect data from the shop floor and combine that with lean manufacturing to drive improvements for a couple of decades now. For a good chunk of that time, I've had the pleasure to work with Sandalwood and Frank Costa as my closest partner. Frank is joining me today to talk about replacing legacy applications with modern systems. Frank, can you give a quick intro to yourself and Sandalwood?
Sure. Frank Costa, been doing this for like 20 years. And for those of you that don't know Sandalwood, I'm thrilled to introduce you to Sandalwood Engineering and Ergonomics and our system integration group. We think of ourselves as problem solvers who bring different technologies together to work in harmony. Our team combined deep engineering expertise with a genuine understanding of how people interact with systems in real world settings. So whether you're struggling with disconnected manufacturing processes or looking to create more user-friendly workspaces, we're the folks that can help connect those dots. Our team specializes in seamlessly connecting disparate technologies and processes to create a cohesive, efficient operating environment. So with decades of combined expertise, our human-centered approach to systems integrations have developed and deployed solutions across manufacturing, e-commerce, and pharmaceutical industrial settings the world over. So I'm really excited today, Tim, to talk about modernizing legacy shop floor applications and to discuss one of the main tools we use to make that happen.
Excellent. Just to get started, can you give an overview of some of the common challenges with the legacy applications like Excel and Access and things like that?
Sure. Manufacturing organizations today face significant challenges with their legacy applications like Excel and Access and other such outdated systems. These challenges, they fall into three critical areas. The first, there's the operational impact. Legacy systems almost seem designed to create these data silos, and that prevents real-time visibility across the operations. When different departments maintain separate spreadsheets and databases, it leads to inconsistencies, duplicate entries, costly errors. These systems also often crash under heavy data loads, causing production delays and just loads and loads of frustration. The second issue we see is a major risk to business continuity.
Mhm.
Many organizations rely on tribal knowledge. You know this, Tim.
Yep.
People that are watching know this. And it's those few employees that understand those legacy systems. You know, as these experts retire or leave the company struggles to maintain these critical operations. And there's also that constant risk of data loss, security vulnerabilities, and compliance issues, especially in the more regulated manufacturing environments. Um, Finally, these outdated systems, they create significant barriers to innovation. They simply weren't designed for modern manufacturing needs like IoT integration, real-time analytics, or any Industry 4.0 initiative. This puts limitations on companies and it creates a competitive disadvantage in today's fast-moving market. Um, all this being said, there are some modern solutions that exist to address these challenges.
And let's talk a little bit more about that. Why is modernizing manufacturing systems essential for getting to efficiency, scalability, and real-time decision making?
Sure. Think of it this way: if you're running your operation using old Excel sheets or those clunky databases, it's kind of like trying to win a race with a bike when everyone else is using a car. You can do it, maybe, but it's not ideal. Uh, when you when you modernize, three big things happen. First, your day-to-day operations just work better. It's no more wasting time, typing in data by hand or waiting for reports. Everything happens automatically and in real time. I've seen companies cut their errors by huge margins just by making the switch. Then there's the growth factor. Modern systems are like rubber bands. They should stretch or scale as you grow.
Mhm.
If implemented correctly, That's a big one, right? It should be, simple and straightforward to add a new production line or equipment or facility to your existing footprint. But here's what I really find exciting about this. It's all about making smarter decisions faster. Just imagine having all your important data right at your fingertips or on your phone, your laptop, wherever you are. You can spot a problem and you can fix it right away. You don't have to wait for, a morning production meeting or a maintenance meeting or engineering review. Um, I liken it to upgrading from your old flip phone to your smartphone. Once you make that switch, you wonder how you ever managed. And along with that, there's the same issue that we get with the flip phone, right? There's data overload, but we'll talk about some ways to mitigate that. And going through this modernization process these days, it's just about staying competitive because you pretty much have to make that leap forward.
Okay. So just at a high level, can you give us an overview of the different things that we're going to talk about today? And just give us an overview of what we'll learn in the session?
Sure, absolutely. Um, well, there's five main topics I'd like to hit. I'll go through an in-depth review of some of the issues with existing legacy systems. I will talk about how using inductive automation's ignition platform can be used not only to modernize your legacy system, but how it can be used to ingest real-time asset data and feed it to other business systems. Um, I'll go through and discuss some of the steps that we take to successfully modernize legacy applications. And I'll follow that up with a real life use case that Sandalwood deployed at a large pharmaceutical company. And finally, dollars and cents, right? I'll
Right.
go through and discuss some of the ROI of modernizing your legacy or standalone applications.
Okay. Let's start with some of the technical limitations. Can you give some information there?
Yeah, sure. Let's walk through some of those headaches, that we see in manufacturing today. And the things I'm talking about today, we see these challenges everywhere. They're not just, it's not just one industry or one customer. We see them all time and time and time again. So let's talk about real-time data, or rather, lack thereof. Here's the thing: these legacy applications like Excel and Access, they were great tools for their time, but they were never designed for today's fast-paced manufacturing environment. When your machine operator needs to know what's happening on the production line right now, they shouldn't be looking at data that's 3 hours old. But that's exactly what's happening with these older systems. It's another analogy is like you're trying to drive forward while only looking in your rear view mirror. Yeah. Another point is scalability, and this is a big one that keeps IT and operations managers up at night. You have a legacy system that might have worked fine when you're handling a few hundred records or data points, but what happens when your business grows and you're dealing with hundreds of thousands or millions of data points from multiple facilities or production lines? These old systems just start to buckle under the pressure. I've seen these cases where just opening up a simple Excel report could take minutes, and God forbid they got to run complex calculations. System freezes up, and suddenly your entire production planning process could grind to a halt. The biggest technical hurdle, though, that I see is what I mentioned earlier. It's the data silos. Like, in most plants we visit, we find maintenance tracking equipment data in one system, quality using another, and production planning working from a completely different set of spreadsheets or databases. It's like having different departments speaking different languages. So, when a quality issue pops up, tracking down root causes becomes this massive treasure hunt through multiple systems. These just aren't inconveniences. They're serious limitations that directly impact, the bottom line. Without that real world data, you can't make quick decisions, especially when it matters most. Without scalability, your growth is basically capped by that, Excel technology, right? And And the biggest ones that I see again is the data silos. They actively prevent you from seeing, the bigger picture of your operations, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Um, let's get into some of the operational inefficiencies like manual data entry or high maintenance cost and reliance on the outdated platforms and so forth.
Sure. Um, Let me share some real world perspectives on the operational efficiencies we're seeing today. And these are challenges that are probably something familiar to many of the people listening on this webinar. Um, I'll start with what I consider the biggest productivity killer, manual data entry. You know, this is a common scenario. I know you've seen it. We've seen it tons of times, right? You've got
Yep.
skilled operators, supervisors, engineers. They're spending hours of their day typing production data into spreadsheets or some other tracking matrix instead of focusing in on value-added activities. Not only is this like a poor use of their time, but every manual entry is another opportunity. We don't use issues anymore. They're opportunities, but they're opportunities for error. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Um,
I know exactly what you mean. Or walking over to whiteboards and writing numbers on whiteboards, and then somebody else types it into Excel, and then that gets retyped into a different Excel spreadsheet and so
yeah,
forth.
yeah, or access database front end, or the list goes on and on. We've all seen
Yep.
it. And you know what? According to studies, and they're cited. You can go look at it on the net. I went with the lower edge, but manual entry can equate from anywhere between 1% and 6%, depending on the complexity and the work condition. And this affects entire production planning process, productivity, you name it. It touches everything. Quality, you know, it can cause major issues. Um,
Yep.
Maintenance costs. I mean, this is where things actually get expensive, right? These systems are, you know, I liken them to vintage cars. They run, they might still run. Keeping them running though just gets more and more costly every year. You're often dealing with outdated platforms, and fewer people know how to maintain these things. I've seen companies where they're held hostage to these legacy systems. They're completely
Right.
dependent on that one IT person who knows, the custom access database or the secret VB code behind that Excel sheet. And what happens when they retire? Well, sometimes you can imagine panic sets in. And I'll be honest, Sandalwood wasn't immune to this either. We had an operations manager here for 30 years who recently retired. He had numerous Excel and Access databases tracking everything from laptop assignments and renewals to the amount of M&Ms we consumed at our Michigan office. It just yeah, it's 45 pounds, 44.93 to be exact. But we use the approach I'm going to discuss later on today to work to a point where we can combine all those systems into one cohesive portal. We're not there yet, to be honest, and we'll get to the stage approach, I think, later on. But we're using what we sell and what we consult on with customers internally on our own processes.
Right.
Which is good, I think. But it's so frustrating. With today's connected world, limited accessibility is still one of the main issues. Like a production manager might need to physically be at a plant to access critical data. Your quality teams can't easily share reports with suppliers. Different facilities basically operating as islands because their systems simply don't talk to each other. When you and I can sit in two different time zones and have a video chat across the world, why are manufacturers still, it's still, I'm emailing an attachment or there's a shared drive, right?
Right.
It's just inefficient. And it's not just annoying, it's actively holding back the business. You're limiting your ability to respond quickly to issues, to scale your operations, and to stay competitive. And again, this increasingly fast-paced market.
Yep. So you talked about the impact on the business and so forth. Let's talk a little bit more about that. What are some of the impacts on the business goals when you have slow response to production changes or compliance and traceability issues and things like that?
Sure. I'll talk about the business objectives, and I think this will resonate with a lot of people on the call today. Yeah, just think about the speed we do business at, right? When the market demands a shift or production issues arise, you need to respond quickly. But with legacy systems, you're essentially operating in slow motion. I've worked with manufacturers who needed the ability to adjust their production schedule mid-shift because the current system wasn't talking to their ERP, and they were relying on old, outdated data, and it couldn't happen. And this was prompted by the fact that scheduling changes at different areas of the line, they were starting to cause quality issues. There was potentially several hours of non-conforming product on their line because they couldn't juggle those windows, right?
Right.
And in today's competitive market, that kind of delay isn't just efficient; it's costly, right? Making hours of non-conforming parts, that costs money that you're the one paying for it. Right? And talking about compliance and traceability, this is an area I know keeps many quality managers up at night with disconnected legacy systems. Excuse me. Sometimes something as basic as a product trace that should take minutes can stretch into days of manual detective work. Imagine having to conduct a recall or respond to audit findings. You're digging through multiple spreadsheets, paper records, databases just to piece together what happened.
Right.
One quality manager told me 60% of their time was just managing the documentation. This was time that was taken, it's taken up most of their day instead of them going through and improving the process or looking for those quality defects on the line, right?
Right.
But here's what I find actually really more concerning. It's the cybersecurity risk. These outdated systems often just lack the most basic security features we take for granted today. Many were designed before cybersecurity was even a major concern. They might not support modern encryption, secure authentication, or just regular security updates. It's like leaving your front door unlocked in a neighborhood where burglars are. In an era where manufacturing is increasingly targeted for cyber attacks, running these outdated systems is putting a welcome sign out for hackers. And they're not just IT problems. These are business problems. And that's the important thing to look at. They directly impact your bottom line, your customer relationship, and your competitive position. There are modern solutions that exist to address these, and I hope we can talk through them later on today.
Okay. So clearly, I think we've established that we need to move away from Excel and Access and some of these old disconnected systems and so forth. Do you have a recommendation for what Sandalwood commonly uses with customers to move away from those into a more modern application?
Yeah, I mean, Sandalwood is an ongoing concern. We are platform agnostic, but when we get those requests, we point them literally in one direction, and that's Inductive Automation's Ignition platform.
Okay.
It's really transformed how we approach these challenges and how manufacturers approach these automation challenges. And for those of you not familiar, Ignition is essentially an industrial application platform that can connect to all your systems and data in one place. Talks API, talks MQTT, OPC, OPC UA, native drivers for a whole slew of equipment. I liken it to sort of the central nervous system of entire operation. And again, what makes it special is its flexibility. It's marketed as a SCADA or HMI software, but it does those things incredibly. Don't get me wrong. But it's really a complete platform that lets you build exactly what you need for your specific manufacturing environment. This is not one of those softwares where you have to bend your process to satisfy the software. The software is built to bend to your process and what you're doing. One thing that customers love about Ignition is it's completely web-based. So teams can securely access real-time information from anywhere. We're talking shop floor, the office, even on their mobile devices. And unlike traditional industrial software with maybe per tag or per user pricing models, Ignition is unlimited. This means you pay once and you can add as many devices, connections, or users as you need without any extra cost. And as the platform's also just incredibly modular. You can start small with just what you need to do today, but you can easily add functionality as your requirements grow. And because it's built on open standards, it plays nice with not only your legacy equipment, but any new equipment that comes in, newer protocols and whatnot. What's really exciting though is how Ignition serves as basically that perfect bridge between OT and IT systems. It speaks both languages and connects to your PLCs on your shop floor, all the way up to your enterprise system, like your existing ERP or MES system. I've personally seen companies transform their operations with Ignition, moving from those disconnected legacy systems we've been discussing to sort of a unified real-time view of their entire operation. It's honestly, it's quite remarkable what's possible when you have the right platform in place.
Right. Okay. So certainly I've worked with Ignition with you guys and so forth, but for specifically for modernizing the legacy applications, why is Ignition such a good fit?
Yeah, it makes sense. Like I mentioned before, let's talk about data connectivity. Again, all those data silos we discussed, Ignition is designed specifically to break those down. It connects to practically everything in your environment, and that includes those old Access and Excel spreadsheets you've been using for years, the PLCs on the shop floor, and again, equipment that comes in. And when we say equipment, I'm not just talking about your standard PLC driven. As we start moving to these more discrete sensors, it can talk the same language as those IoT sensors. And the magic happens when Ignition actually pulls that information in together in real time. This means your team isn't waiting for tomorrow to discover today's problems. They can see what's happening right now, and they can respond immediately. And again, what's great about it is how seamlessly Ignition works with your existing systems. I just keep repeating it, but it's true. Most modernization projects, that's a problem. They get complicated because companies try to replace everything all at once. So using Ignition, you can take a much more practical approach. It works alongside your current ERP, MES, SCADA system and creates that bridge between the old and new. That means you can modernize at your own pace, on your own terms, with your own budget. And again, as I mentioned before, it's totally web-based. So everything runs through a standard web browser, and it just changes how you access that information. Operators on the floor see the same data as managers in the office or executives checking in, I don't know, from home maybe.
Right.
It's mobile friendly and cloud ready, if that's a direction you want to go. But it works just as well in an on-prem situation. And again, it's free. Or excuse me, licensing is unlimited. So you can add as many users, screens, connections, whatever your operation requires, right? This is valuable as you scale, as you grow. This software grows with you without unexpected licensing costs. And, many of the customers that start migrating this find most surprising is they can quickly learn to make that transition. We regularly see companies going from disconnected legacy systems to a modern unified platform. Again, if deployed correctly, we're talking weeks instead of months or years as expected. Yeah, and it's based on, as I said, open protocols. All you need to do is be able to program Python for advanced scripting. You don't want to do that, you can use their WYSIWYG interface and our manager. I can do it. If I can do it, anybody can do it. So
Let's see. You've mentioned a few of the key capabilities of the system already in terms of it being modular and flexibility between cloud-based and on-prem and so forth. What are some of the other key capabilities that you highlight for people?
yeah, and I mean, we can go down. We can go down a rabbit hole, right? But it does come down to those core pieces, right? Real-time production monitoring. For some, for some or less technologically mature clients, it's a game changer. It's super easy to start collecting that data from your assets instead of, you know, and that includes not just the assets, but your human capital as well. Instead of using those, end of shift reports with yesterday's data, Ignition can help you visualize what's happening right now in your production lines. You can see OE metrics, quality parameters, downtime events, all updating in real time. One supplier I worked with was able to significantly increase their throughput simply because operators could immediately see what was coming down the lines and where they were falling behind, and they made adjustments on the fly. There is no more waiting for updating reports to tell you what was wrong. And another portion that we haven't touched to is how Ignition allows you to create custom dashboards tailored exactly to what each role needs to see. Operations might need to see. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I said, yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, your operations might need to see detailed machine status and current production counts, quality team, again, defect trends, parameters, and your executive high-level KPIs, not just for one line or one plant, but maybe across multiple facilities. With Ignition, each role gets exactly the information they need, formatted in a way that makes sense for their role to consume that information. This is where we get to the information overload I alluded to when switching over to a smartphone, right? It creates actionable insights just by allowing these customized views. Another issue is automating some of the manual workflows. Ignition excels at digitizing your manual process and collecting the data that used to be collected, by paper.
Yeah.
Just think of all those Excel spreadsheets that operators are manually logging in production data or paper quality checks that someone has to translate later. Ignition can automate all that. And then again, it cannot be understated. There's the critical aspect of data security and compliance. Unlike those legacy systems that have minimal security features, Ignition provides robust user authentication, detailed audit trails, and secure communications. This is uber important in these regulated industries like pharma. A client told me that what used to take them weeks of preparation for audits now takes hours because all their production and quality data is securely tracked in one system with complete traceability. And what's particularly powerful about these capabilities is that they work together as a cohesive system rather as separate tools. Your real-time monitoring feeds into your automated workflows, which maintain compliance records and appear on role-specific dashboards. It's this integrated approach that creates truly transformative results for manufacturers. Excuse me.
All good. Let's see. So let's talk a little bit more about some of the lessons learned from real world implementations that Sandalwood has done.
Sure. When modernizing a legacy application, let's say an Excel document, you first you have to rethink your data model. Those workbooks might have served well, but they weren't designed with database principles in mind. I recently worked with an automotive supplier who had a massive Excel workbook tracking component qualities across multiple assembly lines. And we started by mapping out their existing data relationships, which cells reference a sheet, calculation, lookup tables, any background macros that we're running to do some of these calculations. Um, Once that was done, we redesigned it as a proper relational database structure with normalized tables, clear relationship, and optimized queries. This fundamental redesign delivered actual query speeds about 50 times faster than they were getting from their Excel-based system. It was remarkable when you actually normalize the
It's a big
data,
difference.
what it looks like. It's huge. Um, for the interface, Ignition gives you so much flexibility than Excel ever could. So when we did this, you think about how users actually work, not just how Excel sheets are structured. With one supplier, we completely reimagined production tracking forms. Instead of replicating, the cell-based grid from Excel, we created intuitive, touch-friendly interfaces that operators use right on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
Incorporated, you can still do this in Excel, but color-coded status indicators, pop-up detail windows, a lot of stuff you just can't do, right?
Yeah.
Or when the original Excel was created, the functionality didn't exist. The other thing too is when you're going through and sort of architecting your modernized legacy system, you need to consider user roles and workflows. So
Mm-hmm.
what I mean by that, don't just consider the producers of the data, but also the consumers of it, and vice versa. So Excel typically, it doesn't handle this well. Everyone gets the same spreadsheet. You might have some protected cells, but in addition, as I mentioned, right, you can design role-based views and permission. Um, your quality teams sees quality focused screens. Production teams see production oriented screens. Um, the one supplier we worked with created 3 different role specific interfaces from what was previously one downtime tracking sheet. And importantly, the information that's feeding it, there's one point of that information flow, but it was disseminated across all 3 of these with one entry point. So you're not duplicating the entries. You're not duplicating um, that opportunity for error.
Right.
So yeah, and they did go through. It was production management, quality, and then upper leadership wanted to be able to look at it. Yeah, so one of the most powerful architectural approaches is to actually build modular components in Ignition that can be reused. So we're not looking at creating one-off screens for everybody. It's designing reusable templates for common
Mm-hmm.
elements like hierarchical controls, production counts, quality check, maintenance logs, or logging in general. The 8.3 version has a form builder that I'm just excited to get to use because it can automate a lot of stuff that we've been programming in the background. And this not only speeds up development, but I think it's undersold. Being able to see a consistent view across your application. So every user
Right.
knows the design DNA, where everything is, and you're not having to relearn different operating patterns. And with this, using this template design, we had a supplier, they created a standard machine component and they
Mm-hmm.
reused it over several hundred machines across 3 different production lines. Not only, again, did it look cohesive in its display, but it made it just incredibly easy to update and add new machines to
Right.
to their footprint. So I mean, we're talking about a lot of real time and what we're doing now. There still is a need for reporting, right? So I don't want
Yeah.
to miss that. Excel reports are typically static and manual, and with Ignition, you can design a reporting system that generates real time or scheduled reports automatically. And again, the standard things we're talking about include production summaries, quality trend data, out of it, exception reports. Basically, whatever the combination of your data that you want to cut it up, you can go ahead and have these reports be generated in real time or time based.
Mm-hmm.
And the important thing to note, the most successful conversions we've worked with treat this as an opportunity to rethink and improve their process, not just digitize what you have.
Right.
The planning of this modernization strategy is just as important as the doing. When you architect thoughtfully, in addition, you're building a foundation that can excuse me, evolve and scale with your manufacturing operations for the foreseeable future.
Yep. And I mean, let's talk about that a little bit more. Certainly, you don't want to, pave the cow path. You want to figure out where the new road should go and so forth. As you approach these different projects, can you spell out for us how you actually approach those projects a little bit?
Yeah, we actually have it's a simple 5-step process we work with using in consulting and actually coding engagements with clients who want to modernize their system.
Mhm.
Again, they're simple, but they're very powerful when executed properly. So, step one, excuse me, you want to assess your current state. The modernization journey always begins with a thorough assessment of where you are today. This isn't just about making a list of your current systems, it's about truly understanding how your information flows through your organization. So we start by, documenting your existing systems and how they connect, or more likely, if you're doing this, how they don't connect with each other. Map out those access database, the paper forms, the Excel spreadsheets, and this including some commercial systems that you might be using that you're not looking to um, augment or modernize, but they're still part of that workflow. Uh,
Mhm.
and this step is important. I work with a supplier. They discovered they had 25 different Excel files being maintained across their entire operation. They thought they had 4 because that's the only 4 the person I was talking to works with. Um, so you want to make sure you do a thorough assessment of that. And along that, still in the same step, right? You want to identify those pain points and inefficiencies. Where are manual data entries creating bottlenecks? Where are decision
Right.
delays delayed because information isn't available? What processes cause the most frustration for your team? And it's important here, you want to be specific. You don't want to say our quality reporting is slow. You want to know quality engineers spend 3 hours every day manually compiling data from multiple sources. Be specific where those pain points are,
Right.
because you'll use them when you're planning it. I think it's step 3 or something like that. The last thing you want to do in this evaluation, right? You want to evaluate your current data architecture. Where's your critical data stored? How is it backed up? Who has access to
Mhm.
it? Yeah. How do different systems share the information? Going through this step actually often reveals a lot of significant risk to your current operating pattern. We did work with a manufacturer who, when we drilled down here, they found their production schedule actually relied on a single access database that was stored on one person's computer, and there was no backup in place. So you can imagine
Safe.
what happens when someone realizes that, right? Um, you know, it's scary. But the assessment phase might seem tedious, but it creates that foundation for everything that follows. You take your time here. The more thorough your assessment, the more successful the end product will be. So
Mhm.
I know it's a lot of words for what's happening now, right? The second one, define your future state and the requirements, right? With
Right.
a clear picture of your current state, you start to look forward and define what you actually want to achieve with modernization. This goes
Mhm.
far beyond, again, replacing Excel or um, these paper forms, right? It's about reimagining how your manufacturing operations work. Again, start by establishing clear objectives and metrics for your modernization initiatives. Are you primarily focused on automating a manual process? Do you need real-time visibility into production metrics? Are you trying to implement predictive maintenance or advanced analytics? Different objectives will lead to different implementation approaches. Once
Right.
you have that, you want to map out detailed businesses and user requirements. And this means getting input from everyone who's supposed to interact with the system. It's the operators, it's the supervisors, it's maintenance team, quality people, and leadership at the various levels. What information do they need?
Right.
How do they want to interact with it? When and where do they need to access this data? One of the powerful tools we use in this when we're trying to do this future state mapping is create the day in the life scenarios for different roles. So that's outlining exactly how that role would interact with the new systems throughout their shift or the time they're at work, right? So the exercise reveals important requirements that might have been otherwise missed. So you actually put yourself in what that person does. So once you have that, you want to actually prioritize your steps. With all these requirements in hand, you need to know what are must-haves versus nice to have. No modernization project can deliver everything at once. So focus on that capability that will deliver the most immediate value. We use just a simple prioritization matrix, which the irony isn't lost on me, it's Excel based. I consider, both business impacts and implementation difficulties, right? This is the old find that low hanging fruit. So making this matrix, you want to find something that is, medium to high impact with low difficulty versus long-term aspirations, which are by definition high impact, but they're high difficult, right? Remember, you're replacing an old system. You're creating a foundation for your manufacturing technologies for years to come. Take the time to think beyond what you need today to where you want your business to be or where it might be heading in the future.
Yep.
Third step is develop that migration strategy, right? Now you got clear requirements in place. The next step is to develop a practical migration strategy, your roadmap, if you will, for how to get from your current state to your desired future state. The first big decision is whether to take a phased approach to the implementation or pursue a full replacement. And there's no right answer here. It very much depends on your situation and what you're trying to change. A phased approach lets you tackle one area or process at a time, which reduces risks, and it does allow for learning along the way. A full replacement might make sense for smaller operations or where legacy systems are just completely unsustainable. It depends. Most manufacturers I work with choose a phased approach. For example, one supplier that we worked with, they started with their most problematic production line. They proved the concept and then gradually expanded to their other lines. And within 6 months, they had transitioned their entire plant from their old system to new modernized system. The whole time keeping production going. You want to go through and develop a detailed plan for data migration. That's a big one. This includes, like I said, cleaning your existing data, validating its accuracy, and structuring it appropriately for your new system. The step is important. Do not underestimate it. Data migration is where a large part of these modernization projects get derailed. If possible, one effective approach is actually to run both the new and the old system in parallel during the transition. It doesn't have to run for long, but it lets you compare outputs, ensures your new system is working correctly before fully cutting over. We work with a manufacturer who ran dual systems for about two weeks. There was a small little team that checked the results daily and made sure everything functioned properly, and then they just transitioned over and never looked back. And the other thing you want to do in this plan is to proactively plan for risk, right? Identify those potential failure points and develop a contingency plan. How will you handle unexpected issues? What's your rollback strategy if something doesn't work as expected? How will you minimize production disruption, which is a huge one? the goal of this step, the goal here is to um, create a balanced migration strategy that is ambitious, but with pragmatism. One that
Right.
delivers, meaningful improvement while managing the risk to the operators. Um, the next step is the actual implementation and integration. And don't worry, I
Mhm.
will I will summarize all four of these steps in a much shorter list. When you reach implementation, that's where your plan actually becomes reality. So with Ignition as your platform, this process we see is typically faster and more flexible than traditional manufacturing software. The first implementation step is, configuring Ignition to connect to your existing systems, ERP, MES, SCADA, databases, equipment, all that jazz. Ignition's strength is its ability to communicate with virtually any system. So it creates, at this point, that unified data framework across your operation. Um, in fact, one of the automotive suppliers we worked with connected it to 5 different systems. It was their ERP, homegrown quality database, their PLC network, homegrown maintenance system, and even one of their legacy production databases. So the step here was to create a single source of truth for their entire operations without replacing any of these one systems. As it proceeded, that's where the replacements came in, right? Um, so once you got that connectivity, you want to make sure you're designing some of those intuitive dashboards and visualizations, right? This is where Ignition actually really shines. As I mentioned, role-specific interfaces to show exactly what each user needs, no more, no less. You know, we can go through. I think I've already spoken to a bunch of different examples of this, but the
Yeah.
key is when you're designing the front end there, you're designing with those user in mind. Involve them in the process, get their feedback, iterate on the design. The most successful implementations I've seen had operators and supervisors working directly in the design of the process.
Yep.
And during implementation, don't wait to establish proper security and access control. Do it from the ground up. Define who can access what information and what actions they can take. Don't make this an afterthought, because going back is not very productive. And again, this is very important in regulated industries where and
Mhm.
with traceability requirements. So um, we did this. We had one supplier, they had 5 levels, starting at read-only dashboards for anyone's consumption inside their network, all the way up to the system admins. Um, and it also creates, using that, you start creating that detailed audit logging for all parameters to make sure your requirements are set. So make sure you start working on the roles there.
Yep.
And throughout this part of the implementation, take an iterative approach. Build, test, feedback, refine. The approach helps catch issues early on when they're easier to fix, and ensures the final system truly meets the user's need. And we're finally at step 5. This is deployment and continuous improvement.
Yep.
This this final step in your modernization journey um, is establishing a framework for continuous improvement. Successful deployments depend heavily on effective training and change management. Remember, say it again, you're not just implementing new technology, you're changing how people work. Develop role-specific training programs that focus on new system benefits, how the new system benefits each user. Show them how it makes their job easier, not just different. We create, one manufacturer created short task-specific training videos that were uploaded on a document retention system that we built in Ignition, so they could go through and keep up with their training. They also identified power users in each department who received advanced training and support their colleagues during this transition. Um, Once deployed, one of the things that we found is helpful is to establish that regular feedback loop to drive the CI, or continuous improvement. So schedule periodic review sessions where users can share what's working well and what could be better. Use the feedback to prioritize enhancements and refinements to the system. An automotive supplier, again, I work with, they held monthly system improvement meetings. It's a small team, but it's still a team where operators and supervisors get together and suggest modification. And these incremental improvements dramatically increase user adoption and satisfaction over time. And ensure your implementation is built for long-term scalability and adaptability. So this step, manufacturing requires constant evolution. New products, new processes, new regulations, and new technologies emerge regularly. Your modernized system should be able to grow and adapt with these changes. And again, with Ignition's modular architecture, you can easily add new capabilities as needed. And modernization isn't a one-time project. It's an ongoing process of continuous improvement. The most successful manufacturers view their initial implementation as just the beginning, not the end of their digital transformation journey. So that was it. The 5 steps. Here comes a wrap up, and they're simple.
Okay.
Know where you are, know where you want to go, make a plan that doesn't boil the ocean, do it, and then create inertia. Make sure there's a mechanism to promote that continuous improvement. Oh, I need some water after that one.
Thank you. And one of the things that I'm struck by listening to all of that is that for companies that are thinking about approaching this on their own, the benefit of being able to work with somebody that has an extensive checklist of all those different things to pay attention to, as you go through that process is, I think, extremely valuable and shouldn't be, overlooked.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I was just going to say we've worked with companies that are starting very nascent, just starting right at the beginning of that process. So we go through all of them. There are other more sophisticated companies that they might do one and two together, or they might have it right. So they have a proper assessment. We'll come in and help them make sure they got everything they need. Usually that future state, things that are missed are the metrics around them, right? You don't want to do something just to do something unless your metric is to modernize the software. There's usually something else that you want to go, right? Some speed, some sort of metric. So we want to make sure that gets captured in that second future state map.
Yeah, I mean, usually you're not doing it just to do it. You're doing it because you've got quality issues, you've got downtime issues. You're trying to reduce your lead time. You're trying to make life easier for the operators. You're running too much overtime. Something that you're trying to improve. Of course, the alternative is just that there's an access database that keeps crashing, and every time it crashes, you have to go back to a backup version, and you're losing data. And so there are those reasons as well that we've both seen out in the real world there.
Yeah.
Let's see. I think we were going to walk through a real world example, but we're down to the last 6 minutes here. Do you think we've got time to walk through that, or should we just do another session sometime? I'd love to have you back.
Well, I'm I like to talk, so maybe another session, unless people have any questions. I don't think we're going to be able to get to that in 6 minutes there, Tim.
Yeah, I don't think so. I did prompt if anybody does have any questions, please put them in now. Otherwise, we'll call it a meeting. If you come up with questions, if you're listening to the recording and you have questions, ping either Frank or I, and we'll be happy to answer the questions as we go. Otherwise, thank you all for your time. Frank, thank you very much for joining me, and we'll get that follow-up session scheduled.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everyone. All right, I've ended.